The emergency beacon cut through the vast silence of space like a scream. Deep in the heart of the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime, the message played for the 47th time in 3 days. The holographic display showed a small, furry creature with large, frightened eyes. Her name was Kayla, and she was one of the last surviving Kahari leaders. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They come again at dawn. We have no weapons, no ships, only farms and children and hope that someone will hear us." The transmission flickered, showing burning fields behind her. "The Vorthok swarm takes everything. They eat our people alive. Our cities burn. Please, anyone who receives this. We need help." The message ended, leaving the Great Council chamber in uncomfortable silence. 300 representatives from across the galaxy sat in their floating seats, each one avoiding eye contact with the others. The Kahari homeworld was dying, and everyone knew it. Ambassador Zex Prime of the Zephyrian Empire spoke first. His metallic voice echoed through the chamber as his 4 arms gestured dismissively. "The Kahari offer nothing of value. No rare minerals, no strategic position, no advanced technology. Why should we risk Zephyrian lives for farmers who cannot even defend themselves?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through several sections. The Zephyrians were known for their military might, but they never fought without profit. Their red armor gleamed under the council lights as Zex Prime continued. "The swarm is strong. Fighting them would cost ships, soldiers, credits. What do we gain? Vegetables? Grain? These things grow on 1,000 worlds." The Cerebran representative, a tall figure with a massive brain visible through transparent skull plating, calculated rapidly. Data streams flowed across the air in front of him, in neat columns. Probability of successful defense, 37%. Cost in galactic credits, 400 million. Strategic value of Kahari system, negligible. Recommendation, non-intervention. More nods followed. The Cerebrans never acted on emotion, only cold logic. If the numbers did not add up, they would not move a single ship. From the white marble platform reserved for the most enlightened species, Saintess Vera of the Altruians raised her glowing hand. Her people were famous across the galaxy for their supposed wisdom and compassion. Many worlds looked to them for moral guidance. "While our hearts weep for the suffering Kahari," she said in her melodious voice, "we must consider the greater harmony of the galaxy. The cosmic balance teaches us that all things happen for a reason. Perhaps this tragedy serves a purpose we cannot yet understand." "What purpose?" The voice came from the human section, sharp and angry. Ambassador Min Jun Park stood up from his chair, his dark eyes blazing. He was younger than most representatives, his black hair showing no gray despite the stress of his position. "What possible purpose does genocide serve?" Saintess Vera's smile never wavered. "The universe corrects itself. Young human. Weak species often make way for stronger ones. This is the natural order. To interfere would be to disrupt the cosmic flow." "Natural order?" Min Jun's hands clenched into fists. "The Vorthok swarm isn't natural selection. They're an artificial plague created by some mad scientist 3 centuries ago. They don't evolve or adapt or build anything. They just consume and reproduce and move on to the next world." "Irrelevant," the Cerebran stated flatly. "Origin does not change. Probability, calculations." Around the chamber, other species found their own excuses. The crystalline shardlings claimed they could not fight in organic atmospheres. The gaseous nebulans said solid matter conflicts were beneath their concern. The aquatic deep swimmers insisted they were needed to guard their own territories. Only a few species showed any sympathy. The Rixoni, themselves survivors of a swarm attack decades ago, spoke quietly about duty to protect others. The young Epsilon Collective offered their small patrol fleet. But these voices were drowned out by the majority. For 6 days, the debate continued. For 6 days, new transmissions arrived from the Kahari homeworld, each one more desperate than the last. The planet's population dropped from 8 million to 5 million to 2 million. Cities fell one by one. The proud Kahari libraries, filled with centuries of poetry and farming wisdom, burned like everything else. On the 7th day, the transmissions stopped. The council chamber fell silent. No one spoke for long minutes. Finally, the Altruian saintess broke the quiet. Let us have a moment of respectful silence for our departed Kahari friends, who have now joined the cosmic harmony. Minjun had heard enough. He stood up so fast his chair clattered backwards. Respectful silence? They're not departed, they're murdered. And we all sat here and let it happen. Human, Zex Prime's metallic voice carried a warning. You forget your place. Earth is a junior member of this council. You have no right to lecture your betters. My betters? Minjun laughed, but there was no humor in it. My betters would have sent help 3 days ago. My betters wouldn't hide behind calculations and cosmic harmony while children get eaten alive. He grabbed his things and headed for the exit. Other representatives watched him go with expressions ranging from confusion to disdain. Near the door, he turned back one last time. The Kahari sent 47 requests for help. 47 times they begged for someone, anyone, to care that they were dying. And you know what the saddest part is? They probably died still believing that someone good existed out there in the galaxy. Someone who would come to help if they just asked nicely enough. The great doors slammed behind him with a sound like thunder. In the silence that followed, the council voted to file the Kahari situation as Regrettable Natural Selection Event number 4847. The galaxy had spoken. The Kahari were not worth saving. But in a small office overlooking the spaceport, Ambassador Minjun Park was already making different calculations. He pulled up shipping schedules, defense fleet positions, and supply depot locations. His fingers flew over the communication console as he began sending coded messages to Earth, to human colonies, to anyone who might remember what it meant to do the right thing. The galaxy had abandoned the Kahari. Humanity would answer. 3 weeks after the last Kahari transmission, a human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the dead system. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the tactical display with growing horror. What had once been a thriving star system now looked like a graveyard. Scanning complete, Admiral, reported Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. The gas giant's moons show signs of strip mining. The asteroid belt is almost completely harvested. And the planet. He paused, swallowing hard. Ma'am, the Kahari homeworld looks like it's been chewed up and spit out. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She had commanded fleets for 15 years, fought in 3 wars, and seen more death than any person should. But this was different. This was what evil looked like when good people did nothing. How many ships did we manage to gather? She asked. 67 vessels total, answered Commander Jackson, her second in command. Most of them volunteers. We have 12 actual military ships, including 8 destroyers and 3 cruisers. The rest are converted cargo haulers, research vessels, and civilian transports loaded with medical supplies and prefab shelters. It wasn't much. The human fleet that had answered Ambassador Park's call was a strange mix of official Navy ships and civilian volunteers. When Earth's government had officially refused to authorize military action, regular citizens had stepped forward instead. Cargo ship captains welded armor plating onto their hulls and mounted whatever weapons they could find. Research teams converted their labs into medical bays. Even some wealthy civilians had bought old military surplus ships and joined the fleet. Admiral, came a voice from communications. We're getting a signal. Very weak. Coming from the planet's northern continent. Sarah's heart jumped. Survivors? It's possible, ma'am. The signal is definitely artificial, but it's buried under a lot of interference. The swarm must have done something to the atmosphere. Plot a course for the source of that signal. All ships, maintain formation and stay alert. The swarm might have left some ships behind to finish the job. The human fleet moved deeper into the system, past floating debris that had once been Kahari orbital stations. The planet itself came into view slowly, and Sarah felt sick looking at it. Great scars covered the surface where the swarm had strip-mined entire mountain ranges. The beautiful blue-green world she had seen in the council recordings now looked brown and wounded. "Contact!" shouted Torres. "Multiple swarm vessels, bearing 2-7 Mark IV. Looks like a cleanup crew, maybe 30 ships." The swarm vessels were ugly things, all sharp angles and organic curves growing together like metal cancers. They moved without formation or pattern, more like a pack of wild animals than a proper fleet. When they spotted the humans, they immediately turned and charged. No communication attempted. "All ships, engage at will," Sarah ordered. "Priority targets are the larger bioships. Don't let them get close." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Missiles and energy beams reached across space to slam into swarm hulls. The aliens returned fire with living weapons that writhed through space like angry snakes. One of the converted cargo ships, the Times New Mumbai Asterisk, took a direct hit that tore through her improvised armor. But her captain, an elderly merchant named Singh, kept fighting even as his ship burned around him. "This is for the children." Singh's voice crackled over the radio as he rammed his dying ship into a swarm bioship twice its size. Both vessels exploded in a ball of white fire. The swarm ships were dangerous, but they had been designed to hunt defenseless prey. They were not ready for humans who fought back with desperate fury. One by one, the alien vessels were destroyed or driven off. When the last swarm ship fled into hyperspace, the humans had lost 3 vessels but saved any survivors still on the planet. "Take us down," Sarah ordered. "Launch all landing craft. I want search and rescue teams on the ground within the hour." The descent through the poisoned atmosphere was rough. The swarm had released toxins that killed most plant life and made the air barely breathable. Human landing parties wore environmental suits as they searched through the ruins of Kahari cities. They found the survivors in underground shelters, hidden beneath schools and hospitals and family homes. Thousands of Kahari had somehow stayed alive by eating stored food and drinking recycled water. When the first human marines broke through the sealed doors, the aliens inside couldn't believe what they were seeing. "You came," whispered an elderly Kahari female, reaching out with a shaking paw to touch Sergeant Kim's armored hand. "We heard the explosions above and thought it was the swarm returning to finish us. But you came. We're getting you out of here," Kim promised. "All of you. We have medical ships and supply ships. You're going to be okay." It took 3 days to find all the hidden shelters and evacuate the survivors. There were 63,000 Kahari left, out of the 8 million who had lived on the planet before the attack. Many were injured or sick from weeks of hiding underground. The human medical teams worked around the clock, treating patients they had never seen before with equipment designed for human biology. Dr. Lisa Park, Ambassador Park's daughter, led one of the medical teams. She had volunteered immediately when her father sent word about the mission. Now she worked 18-hour days, learning Kahari anatomy as she treated burns and malnutrition and wounds that would take months to heal. "The protein structures are similar to Earth mammals," she explained to her team as they prepared for another surgery. "But their blood chemistry is completely different. We have to be careful with the medications." While the medical teams worked, the engineering crews began setting up temporary shelters on the planet's surface. The Kahari could not stay underground forever, and their world was too damaged to support them without help. Human atmospheric processors worked to clean the poisoned air. Hydroponic farms provided fresh food. Slowly, carefully, the humans began to rebuild what the swarm had destroyed. But even as they worked, troubling news arrived from the galaxy beyond. The Galactic Council had officially condemned the human intervention as an illegal act of aggression. Several major species threatened economic sanctions against human worlds. Trade agreements were being cancelled. Diplomatic relations were freezing. "They're treating us like criminals for saving lives," Commander Jackson said as he read the latest reports. "Half the galaxy is acting like we're the bad guys here." Admiral Chen looked out at the work crews building new homes for Kahari families. Human soldiers were teaching Kahari children how to play soccer with a makeshift ball. Engineers and farmers worked side by side, sharing knowledge and tools. "Let them," she said quietly. "History will judge who was right and who was wrong. And I'd rather be wrong for saving people than right for letting them die." The rescue mission continued. But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. Word was already spreading that the humans had acted alone, without permission or support from the galactic community. Some species were angry about the precedent it set. Others were simply embarrassed that they had been shown up by a junior species. Whatever happened next, humanity had made their choice clear. When the galaxy abandoned those who needed help, humans would answer the call, even if they had to stand alone. The counterattack came sooner than anyone expected. Captain Lee Heejin was supervising the loading of Kahari evacuees onto her ship, the Times Soul's Pride *, when the alarms started screaming. The converted cargo vessel shuddered as something massive dropped out of hyperspace directly above the planet. "Captain," Ensign Rodriguez's voice cracked with panic. "Long-range sensors are picking up a massive swarm fleet. At least 200 ships, including 3 of those planet-killer bioships." Heejin ran to the bridge, her boots echoing through corridors packed with frightened Kahari families. The Times Soul's Pride Times had been a grain transport before the war, but her crew had welded armor plates to her hull and mounted every weapon they could find. She wasn't pretty, but she was home to 43 humans who refused to let innocent people die. "Get me Admiral Chen," Heejin ordered as she dropped into her command chair. The main screen lit up with Sarah's face, grim and determined. "Sarah, please tell me you have a plan." "Working on it," the Admiral replied. "The swarm brought friends this time. We're outnumbered 6-1, and intelligence suggests they've been planning this attack for weeks. Someone told them we were coming." That hit Heijin like a punch to the stomach. "Someone told them? You mean another species? Another member of the Galactic Council?" "Why?" "That's exactly what I mean. We intercepted some communications before they went to scramble. At least 3 Council species have been feeding the swarm information about our fleet positions, our supply lines, everything." The betrayal was almost too big to process. It was one thing for the galaxy to refuse help. It was another thing entirely to actively work against the people trying to save lives. Heijin felt anger burn in her chest like rocket fuel. "Orders, Admiral? Hold the northern evacuation site as long as you can." The Times, Defiant Times, and most of the fleet are engaging the main swarm force. But they sent a strike group your way, probably hoping to finish off the survivors while we're busy. Heijin looked at her tactical display. 30 swarm ships were headed directly for her position, including one of the massive command bioships that coordinated swarm attacks. Her own ship had 8 converted cargo haulers and 2 actual military vessels for support. The math was not encouraging. "Understood, Admiral. We'll hold them." "Heijin." Sarah's voice softened for just a moment. "I'm sorry. I can't send more help. If we lose the main battle, I know. Just make sure our sacrifice means something." The connection ended, leaving Heijin alone with her thoughts for exactly 3 seconds before the swarm ships entered weapons range. The first bioship was the size of a city block, covered in chitinous armor and bristling with organic weapons. It fired something that looked like a living missile, a writhing mass of teeth and claws that screamed through space toward the human ships. "All vessels, evasive maneuvers," Heijin ordered. "Focus fire on the command ship. If we can take out their coordinator, The smaller ships will be confused. The Times Soul's Pride Times opened fire with her improvised weapons, sending streams of plasma and kinetic rounds toward the massive bioship. Around her, the other human vessels did the same, creating a wall of fire between the swarm and the planet below. But the enemy was too strong. One by one, the human ships began taking damage. The Times Busan Defender, Asterisk, a converted mining ship, lost her engines and began drifting helplessly through space. The Times New Soul Asterisk, the only actual military vessel in the group, took a direct hit that cracked her hull open like an egg. "Captain," Rodriguez called out from his station. "We've lost main power. Backup systems are coming online, but weapons are down." Heijin watched helplessly as swarm ships moved past her damaged vessel toward the planet. Below them, hundreds of Kahari families were still waiting for evacuation. Children and elderly, wounded and sick, all depending on the humans to protect them. Engineering. How long until weapons are back online? "At least 20 minutes, Captain." 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, the swarm could kill every living being on the planet's surface. Heijin looked at her options and realized she only had one choice left. "All hands, this is the captain. Abandon ship. I repeat, all hands, abandon ship, immediately." "Ma'am?" Rodriguez stared at her in confusion. "We're not that badly damaged. Engineering says we can make repairs." "Rodriguez, I need you to get to the escape pods right now." "That's an order." "Captain, I don't understand. The Times Soul's Pride Times still has one working engine and a full cargo hold of grain alcohol from our last supply run." Heijin's voice was calm as she explained her plan. "When that alcohol explodes, it's going to take out everything in a half-kilometer radius." The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. The only way to stop the swarm ships was to ram them with an exploding cargo hauler, and someone had to stay behind to steer. "Captain, no," whispered Ensign Park, barely 18 years old. "And on her first mission, there has to be another way." "There isn't, kid. And even if there was, I'm not leaving those families down there to die. Not when I can do something about it. I'm not leaving the spirited, cross-line, well-I-meanited. I'm not leaving those families down there." One by one, her crew made their way to the escape pods. Rodriguez was the last to leave, and he stood in the bridge doorway for a long moment. "Captain, it's been an honor serving with you. Take care of yourself, Rodriguez. And tell your children about today. Tell them about the day humans stood up for what was right." When the bridge was empty, Heijin manually overrode the autopilot and took direct control of her ship. The Times, Soul's Pride Times, turned toward the largest concentration of swarm vessels and began accelerating. The bioships saw her coming and tried to change course, but they were too big and too slow. "This is Captain Lee Heijin of the Times Soul's Pride Asterisk." She broadcast on all frequencies. "To any swarm ships receiving this transmission, you picked the wrong species to mess with." The cargo ship slammed into the command bioship at nearly half the speed of light. The explosion could be seen from space, a brief new star that outshone the system's sun, for almost a full second. When the light faded, 17 swarm ships had been destroyed, including the command vessel that had been coordinating the attack. The remaining swarm ships, suddenly cut off from their controller, milled around in confusion. This gave the other human vessels time to regroup and drive them off. The evacuation site was saved. Later, Admiral Chen stood in the ruins of a Kahari city, reading the casualty reports. The human fleet had lost 12 ships and over 400 volunteers. The Times Soul's Pride Times and her captain were gone, but they had held the line long enough to evacuate another 20,000 Kahari civilians. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Ambassador Park, who had arrived with a supply convoy from Earth. His face was gray with exhaustion and grief. "Minjun, I'm sorry about your daughter. Dr. Lisa Park saved over 300 lives before the end. I'm sorry. She knew the risks when she volunteered, he replied quietly. We all did. But Sarah, the galaxy is turning against us. The Council has imposed trade sanctions. 3 species have formally declared us a rogue state, and intelligence suggests that more Council members are actively helping the swarm. Sarah looked up at the poisoned sky, where human ships continued their rescue work despite everything arrayed against them. Let them. History doesn't remember the names of the people who stood by and watched. Even if we lose everything, even if Earth itself becomes a target, especially then. Sarah's voice was firm, because that's when it matters most. When the cost is highest and the odds are worst, that's when you find out what kind of person you really are. Above them, a human medical ship descended through the toxic atmosphere, carrying supplies for the Kahari refugees below. The pilot was probably a volunteer, probably risking everything to help strangers from a species she had never met before. The galaxy may have abandoned them, Sarah said, watching the ship land. But humanity answered. And we'll keep answering, no matter what it costs us. In the distance, swarm ships gathered like storm clouds, preparing for another attack. This time, they would bring allies from the Galactic Council itself. But the humans would be ready. They always were. The economic war began 3 days after Captain Lee's sacrifice. Dr. G1 Sato looked up from her research console as another message flashed across her screen. The Zephyrian Empire had just cancelled all contracts with human mining operations. The Cerebrans had frozen human bank accounts throughout their territory. Even the supposedly neutral Epsilon Collective had closed their trade routes to human cargo ships. That's the 7th species this week, muttered her assistant, Kahari engineer Pela Windwhisper. The young alien had volunteered to work with the human research teams after her family was evacuated from the homeworld. At this rate, Earth won't be able to afford basic supplies within a month. G1 rubbed her tired eyes. She had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to find a weakness in the swarm's biological systems. Around her, the makeshift laboratory hummed with activity as human and Kahari scientists worked together, sharing knowledge that their species had developed over centuries. It gets worse, said Commander Park, entering the lab with a datapad full of bad news. Intelligence reports that the Altruians are providing the swarm with detailed maps of our supply routes. The Shardlings are giving them our ship specifications. And the Deep Swimmers are actually transporting swarm biomatter to help them build new fleets. The betrayal still felt like a knife in the gut. These were the same species that gave speeches about galactic harmony and cosmic balance. Now they were actively helping a genocidal plague spread across the galaxy, all because they were embarrassed that humans had done the right thing. Any word from Earth? G1 asked. The government is holding emergency sessions, but they're under enormous pressure to recall our fleets. The economic sanctions are working. Human colonies are struggling to get basic medical supplies. Food shipments are being blocked. Some of our outer settlements might not survive the winter. G1 looked through the lab's window at the work crews outside. Human engineers were teaching Kahari technicians how to build atmospheric processors. Kahari farmers were showing human agriculturalists which plants could grow in the poisoned soil. Despite everything the galaxy was doing to punish them, the 2 species were learning to work together. We need more time, she said quietly. I'm close to a breakthrough, but I need more time to study their biosignatures. Time is what we don't have. Commander Park pulled up a tactical display showing the local star systems. Long-range sensors are picking up massive swarm movements. They're not just planning another attack on this system. They're mobilizing everything they have. Intelligence estimates they're building the largest fleet in their history. Before G1 could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The 3 of them rushed outside to see human and Kahari personnel pointing at the sky. High above, new ships were dropping out of hyperspace. But these weren't Swarm vessels. Those are human designs, whispered Pela. But I've never seen ships like that before. The vessels were clearly built in human shipyards, but they looked different from standard fleet models. Rougher, more improvised. As they descended toward the planet's surface, G1 could see that some of them were painted with names and slogans. The Times, Second Chance, asterisk. The Times, Never Forget, asterisk. The Times, Freedom's Price, asterisk. Who are they? Commander Park was already on his radio, trying to contact the newcomers. The answer came over the general frequency in a voice roughened by age and hard living. This is Colonel Marcus Webb, commanding the Volunteer Regiment. We heard you. Folks could use some help. G1 felt her heart skip. Marcus Webb was a legend, a retired colonial marine who had fought in the border wars 20 years ago. When the government recalled him to active duty for the Kahari mission, he had publicly resigned his commission and disappeared. Apparently, he had been busy. Colonel, this is Commander Park. What's your status? We've got 87 ships, mix of retired military and civilian volunteers, mining vessels, cargo haulers, some old warships that were headed for the scrap yards. About 2,000 people total, all of them pissed off about what the galaxy's doing to you. The ships landed in a sprawling field outside the main settlement. As the cargo ramps dropped, G1 saw the most unlikely military force she had ever witnessed. Gray-haired veterans walking beside teenage colonists, farmers carrying military-grade weapons, corporate executives wearing jury-rigged combat armor. They were united by only one thing: the conviction that what was happening here was wrong. We brought supplies, Colonel Webb explained as he met with Admiral Chen and the other commanders. Medical equipment, weapons, food, everything we could scrape together. But more importantly, we brought you this. He handed Admiral Chen a datapad containing a message from the human colonies. Hundreds of settlements had signed it. From the mining worlds of the Tau Ceti system to the agricultural planets of Wolf 359, we, the undersigned representatives of free human worlds, declare our support for the humanitarian mission in Kahari space. Chen read aloud. We reject the economic blackmail of the Galactic Council and pledge our resources to this cause. We would rather stand alone with our conscience clear than stand with the galaxy in shame. It wasn't official government backing, but it was something else. A promise that humanity would not abandon its principles, no matter what the cost. There's more, Webb continued. Intel suggests that not everyone in the galaxy agrees with the Council's position. The Rixoni are quietly moving supplies to neutral systems where we can pick them up. A few Epsilon Collective commanders are accidentally missing swarm fleet movements in their reports. And we've got confirmation that several younger species are watching this situation very carefully. Meaning? Meaning the galaxy is starting to split. The old powers want to maintain their control, keep things stable, avoid messy moral questions. But the newer species, the ones who remember what it was like to be weak and defenseless, they're starting to ask why we're the only ones who answered the call. Over the next few days, the volunteer regiment integrated with the existing human forces. They brought fresh ideas, new equipment, and most importantly, renewed hope. But they also brought sobering intelligence about what was coming. The swarm has been building bioships in 7 different systems, Webb reported during a strategy meeting. Our best estimates put their total fleet strength at over 3,000 vessels. Worse, they've been getting help with their tactics. Someone has been teaching them human battle formations. The Council species. Admiral Chen said grimly. They want to make sure we lose badly enough that no one else ever tries this again. Maybe. Or maybe they want to test how far they can push us before we break. Either way, when they come, they're not planning to leave any survivors. Not human, not Kahari. Nobody. That night, G1 worked alone in her laboratory, surrounded by biological samples and quantum computers. She had been studying swarm biosignatures for weeks, looking for some weakness in their hive mind communication system. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning, when she finally understood how their neural networks synchronized across vast distances. "They're using quantum entanglement," she breathed, staring at the data streaming across her screens. "The bioships are all connected through quantum-paired neurons. If I could generate the right frequency, the right pattern." She worked feverishly for the rest of the night, building theoretical models and running simulations. By dawn, she had a plan. It was dangerous, probably impossible, and definitely suicidal. But it might work. "You want to do what?" Admiral Chen stared at the research proposal G1 had just handed her. "Build a quantum disruptor. If I can get close enough to the swarm's main fleet, I can broadcast a signal that will sever their hive-mind connection. Without central coordination, their ships will be helpless." "How close?" G1 swallowed hard. "Within the formation, someone would have to fly directly into the center of their fleet and manually trigger the device." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. It was a suicide mission with almost no chance of success. But if it worked, it could save not just the Kahari, but every species the swarm would target next. "I'll do it," Admiral Chen said immediately. "No," Colonel Webb's voice was firm. "You're needed here to coordinate the defense. I'll take a small strike force, and we all go." The voice belonged to Pela Windwhisper. The young Kahari engineer had been quietly listening from the back of the room. "My people and yours. Together, we fight for each other. Because that's what friends do." Outside, the swarm fleet was already moving. Long-range sensors showed the largest armada in galactic history converging on the Kahari system. They came not just to finish what they had started, but to teach the galaxy a lesson about the price of defying the cosmic order. But humanity had already learned a different lesson. That sometimes, the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. And they were ready to pay whatever price that demanded. The final battle began at dawn on the 43rd day after humanity's arrival in Kahari space. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Time's defiant asterisk, watching the tactical display with calm determination. The swarm fleet hung in space like a dark cloud, 3,000 bioships arranged in perfect formation. At their center, the massive command vessel pulsed with sickly bioluminescence, coordinating the movements of every ship in the armada. "All vessels report ready, Admiral," Commander Jackson announced. 167 ships total. Human naval vessels, volunteer forces, civilian conversions, and... He paused, checking his readings. 43 Kahari fighters. The Kahari fighters were small, improvised craft built from salvaged materials and powered by desperate courage. The surviving Kahari had insisted on joining the battle, despite having no military experience. They flew beside converted grain haulers and retired warships, a fleet united not by military doctrine but by shared purpose. "Dr. Sato reports the quantum disruptor is ready," Jackson continued. "She estimates a 73% chance of successfully severing the swarm's hive-mind connection, assuming we can get within 5 kilometers of their command ship. And the chance of surviving long enough to trigger it? She didn't calculate that one, ma'am." Sarah nodded grimly. Everyone knew this was a suicide mission. The human fleet was outnumbered 20 to 1. The galaxy's major powers were either actively supporting the swarm or maintaining careful neutrality. Earth's government had officially disavowed the mission to avoid economic retaliation. Humanity was truly alone. But they were not backing down. "Open a channel to all ships," Sarah ordered. Her words would be broadcast not just to the human fleet, but to the Kahari vessels, to the swarm armada, and to monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet. In a few minutes, we're going to fly into the largest enemy formation in galactic history. Most of us probably won't come back. But that's not why we're here. We're here because 47 days ago, 8 million innocent people called for help, and no one answered. We're here because the galaxy's great civilizations decided that mercy was too expensive and justice was too inconvenient. We're here because sometimes, doing what's right matters more than doing what's safe. To the swarm ships listening to this transmission, you made a mistake when you chose to prey on the defenseless. Today, you learn what happens when humanity says, enough. To the Galactic Council members who betrayed their own principles, history will remember this day. It will remember who stood with the innocent and who stood aside. It will remember who answered the call and who turned away. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, weapons free. Let's go save some lives. The human fleet surged forward, accelerating toward the swarm formation with everything their engines could give them. The bioships responded immediately, their living weapons reaching out like grasping tentacles to tear the attackers apart. The Times New Mumbai asterisk, rebuilt after Singh's sacrifice, opened fire first. Her captain, Singh's daughter Priya, had volunteered to take her father's place. "This one's for you, Papa," she whispered, as her ship's weapons lit up the darkness. Around her, the converted civilian vessels fought with desperate creativity. Cargo ships used their loading arms as improvised weapons. Research vessels fired experimental energy beams that their designers had never intended for combat. Mining ships launched clouds of ore-processing nanobots that ate through swarm armor like acid. The Kahari fighters darted between the larger ships, their small size allowing them to avoid the bioship's main weapons. Pela Windwhisper flew her tiny craft directly at a swarm command node, firing everything she had while screaming ancient Kahari battle songs that had been thought lost forever. But the enemy was too strong. For every swarm ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. Human vessels disappeared in balls of fire as living missiles found their targets. The Times, Defiant Times herself, took hit after hit, her hull plates buckling under the assault. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Damage Control. "We've lost main engines. Backup power is failing." "Keep us moving," Sarah ordered. "We just need to get close enough." "Admiral!" The tactical officer's voice was full of shock. New contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Multiple vectors. On the display, Sarah watched in amazement as ships began appearing throughout the system. Not swarm vessels or council forces, but something else entirely. The ships were small and rough, clearly built with limited resources. But they flew in perfect formation, and they were heading straight for the battle. "This is Captain Vex, of the Rixoni Defense Corps," came a transmission on the emergency frequency. "Sorry. We're late. Had to make a few stops to pick up friends." More ships materialized. The young Epsilon Collective had brought their entire frontier fleet. A group of independent mining colonies arrived in converted ore haulers. Even some individual ships from major council species appeared, their crews apparently acting without official authorization. "Looks like the galaxy isn't as unified as the council thought," Commander Jackson observed. The reinforcements smashed into the swarm's flank, disrupting their formation and drawing fire away from the battered human fleet. But the battle was far from over. The swarm command ship still pulsed with bioluminescent communication signals, coordinating the defense with ruthless efficiency. "Dr. Sato, are you ready?" Sarah asked over the intercom. "Ready, Admiral. But I need to get within 5 kilometers of that command ship to trigger the disruptor." "Understood. All ships, form up on the Times. Defiant asterisk. We're making a final push." What remained of the human fleet gathered around Sarah's flagship for one last charge. Damaged ships with failing systems flew alongside fresh reinforcements. Human crews worked beside Kahari engineers. Species that had never met before fought side by side against the darkness. The formation drove deep into the swarm fleet, taking massive casualties but never stopping. The Times Soul's Memory asterisk, named after Captain Lee's destroyed ship, rammed through a bioship blockade to clear the way. The times Earth's answer times sacrificed herself to destroy a cluster of command nodes. One by one, the human ships fell, but they kept pushing forward. Finally, with only a dozen ships left, they reached the center of the swarm formation. The command vessel loomed above them, like a living mountain, its bio-armor crawling with defensive weapons. Sarah could see the quantum disruptor readings on her screen, showing the massive web of neural connections that linked every swarm ship together. "This is it," she announced. "All ships, give us covering fire." "Dr. Sato, trigger the device on my mark." The remaining vessels opened fire with everything they had, pouring destruction into the command ship's defenses. The bioship's weapons responded, tearing through human hulls like paper. But for just a moment, they created an opening. Now, Dr. Sato activated the quantum disruptor. The device sent out a pulse of specially tuned energy that resonated with the swarm's neural quantum entanglement. For a brief instant, every bioship in the fleet experienced the same sensation. Complete, overwhelming silence. The effect was immediate and devastating. 3,000 swarm vessels suddenly found themselves cut off from their hive mind. Their coordination shattered. Their purpose unclear. They began drifting aimlessly through space, no longer a fleet but a collection of confused individual ships. The human and allied vessels wasted no time. They targeted the now helpless bioships systematically, destroying the swarm's command structure ship by ship. Without their central coordination, the aliens had no idea how to respond to the coordinated attack. Within an hour, it was over. The largest swarm fleet in history had been completely destroyed. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was finally broken. Later, as rescue ships pulled survivors from the wreckage, Sarah stood in what was left of her bridge and watched the aftermath. Human medical teams were already treating wounded allies from a dozen different species. Engineers from 3 different civilizations worked together to repair damaged ships. Children who had never seen their homeworld played together in the corridors of refugee vessels. "Admiral." Commander Jackson handed her a communication from the Galactic Council. "They want to discuss terms for humanity's readmission to the galactic community." Sarah looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without reading the details. "Send them our terms instead," she said. "Full autonomy for all rescued Kahari populations, reparations for the species that helped us against Council orders, and a formal apology for their role in supporting genocide." "Ma'am, they'll never agree to those terms. And then they'll have to explain to their own people why they're still enemies of the species that saved the galaxy." Over the following months, the political situation shifted dramatically. Public opinion across dozens of worlds turned against the Council species that had supported the swarm. Several governments fell as their own populations demanded answers. The Altruian Saintess was stripped of her title when recordings surfaced of her coordinating with swarm forces. The Zephyrian military command was purged after evidence emerged of their weapons sales to the bioship builders. Meanwhile, humanity's reputation soared. The species that had once been dismissed as naive idealists were now seen as the only ones with the courage to act when action was needed. Young people across the galaxy began learning human languages and studying human philosophy. The phrase, "Humanity answers," became a rallying cry for anyone fighting against injustice. The Kahari homeworld was slowly rebuilt. But now it was home to more than just Kahari. Human colonists worked alongside the native farmers. Rixoni engineers helped design new cities. Epsilon Collective scientists shared their research freely. The planet became a symbol of what cooperation could accomplish when species chose to work together instead of competing for dominance. Years later, when historians wrote about the Kahari crisis, they would mark it as the moment when the galaxy's moral center shifted. The old order, based on cold calculation and self-interest, gave way to something new. Not perfect, not without conflict, but built on the radical idea that some things mattered more than profit or political advantage. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that humanity had always known, but the galaxy had forgotten. When someone calls for help, you answer, even if you have to stand alone, even if the cost is everything, because that's what makes you human.